Something comes up the fire tower stairs every single night at 2:17 a.m. And this Appalachian Mountains horror story comes out of a real, working fire lookout tower still standing in the West Virginia mountains today. One that state park visitors sleep in every summer without knowing what one seasonal ranger says climbs those same steps after the guests go home. In August of 2017, deep in Pocahontas County, West Virginia, a 27-year-old state forest ranger named Cory Jameson was assigned to a 2-week fire watch rotation at a tower that's normally rented out to campers. The only fire tower of its kind still standing east of the Mississippi. Everything was routine until his third night alone at 53 feet, when he found something in the tower's guest logbook that the park office had no explanation for. And by the end of that rotation, Cory Jameson was the one who requested the tower never be staffed alone again. What you're about to hear is his account. Cory carried his gear up 69 wooden steps in a single trip because his knees were 27 and his pride hadn't caught up to that fact yet. A battery lantern, 2 gallons of water, a paperback western with a coffee ring soaked into the cover. And the guest logbook every camper before him had been required to keep, its spine already cracked from 3 summers of use. 3 summers of trail maintenance and campground checks at Seneca State Forest had trained Cory to expect a job that looked exciting on a brochure and felt like watching paint dry in practice. A dry stretch had rolled up from the Greenbrier Valley, lightning without rain, the kind of pattern that makes a district office nervous enough to staff a tower they usually just rent out for $85 a night. Cory got the assignment because he was available, not because anyone thought something would happen. The cab at the top was 14 feet square, no electricity, no running water, no cell signal. The same conditions the rental listing bragged about as rustic charm. A single bed frame took up one corner. A cold wood stove sat in another. Windows ran the full perimeter, glass on all 4 sides, so a person standing in the middle of the room could see every ridge of the forest at once, and in theory, nothing could get close without being seen first. His only lifeline was a hand crank radio and one scheduled check-in with the Marlinton District Office, 6 a.m. every morning, without fail. After that, nothing until the sun came back around. The job itself was hourly log entries and heat shimmer ridgelines that probably wouldn't produce smoke. Cory wanted to get through the rotation clean, log his hours, and put the overtime toward a truck payment. That was the whole plan. Small stakes, the kind that don't survive a story like this one. The wind moved through the catwalk railing in a 2-second cycle he'd already memorized by his first evening. And underneath it, there was nothing else. No traffic, no dogs, just insects, and his own boots on the cab floor. He almost missed the logbook entry from 3 pages back. A family, the last recorded guests before his rotation started. Their final line just said, "Heard it on the stairs again. Didn't check this time." No name followed it. No signature. And when Cory flipped to the reservation calendar taped inside the cover, there was no record of any family booking that week at all, which is the detail that's going to matter a lot more later than it does right now. Night 1 came and went without a single thing worth logging. Cory ate cold beans out of the can, read 40 pages of his paperback western by lantern light, and fell asleep before 10 with the logbook still open on the table. Night 2 was different, and it started at exactly 2:17 in the morning. The storage shed sat at the base of the tower, a locked steel box where the district kept extra firewood and tools for whoever was staffing the lookout. Cory heard its latch turn, not rattle, not bang against the wind, turn, slow and deliberate, the way a hand moves when it already knows which direction the mechanism gives. He climbed down all 69 steps, with the lantern swinging in one fist, half expecting a bear had figured out how to work a handle. The shed was locked exactly the way he'd left it. He stood there a minute in his boxers and a t-shirt, feeling foolish, then climbed back up and logged it. Wind, latch worn. That was the kind of write-up his supervisor wanted. Explainable. Nothing requiring a follow-up call. Night 3, same time, and Cory didn't go down at all. He lay flat on the cab floor instead, ear pressed against the boards, and the latch sound came again, except this time there was weight underneath it. Something testing the door slowly enough that it wasn't wind. Patient enough that it wasn't an animal in a hurry to get at the firewood. And 1 minute before it started, at 2:16, the radio's clock display blinked out. That clock ran on its own battery, separate from the crank unit, and it had no earthly reason to fail. Cory sat up and stared at the dead little screen in the dark, and that's when he noticed the second thing, the thermometer nailed to the cab wall. The same one every guest before him had probably glanced at and ignored, was reading 61 degrees. 10 degrees colder than it had read at sunset, in a month where the mountain hadn't dropped below 70 after dark in over a week. He said it out loud into the logbook, a habit he'd picked up from 3 summers of solo shifts. 61 degrees. No explanation. He wrote that down too. The air in the cab had gone thick with something Cory couldn't place until later. Wet iron, the smell inside the storage shed after a hard rain, except it hadn't rained in 9 days. Here's the detail that's easy to miss on a first listen, the one that took Cory himself a few more nights to notice. The thermometer only dropped during those same 2 minutes the sound was active. Not before, not after. He never did find out why, and neither did the district office when he finally reported it, which tells you something about how far this story is willing to go before it explains anything at all. The latch below stopped turning at 2:18, right on schedule, same as it had the night before. Small relief, and Cory let himself feel it for about 3 seconds before his brain caught up with what he'd actually been listening to. The sound had never once matched the direction gravity should have pulled a swinging door open. A door swings out, or it swings in, and either way there's a give to it, a moment where the hinge does the work instead of the hand. This hadn't had that. Whatever was working, that handle wasn't trying to get the door open, it was closing it. From the outside, on its own schedule. Like something making very sure Cory stayed exactly where he was until it was ready for him not to. He didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat with his back against the cold wood stove, lantern turned all the way up, listening to insects start their racket again outside the windows like absolutely nothing had happened 3 hours earlier. And somewhere in the back of his mind, that logbook entry from the family with no reservation was starting to make a different kind of sense than it had 2 nights before. Night 4, and Cory reminded himself of the one fact that mattered most. The 6 a.m. radio check-in was his only outbound contact with anyone, and right now it was 1:40 in the morning, 4 hours out. Whatever happened between now and then, help wasn't a phone call away. It was a fixed number on a clock. 2 summers back, a retired district ranger named Otis Kessler had trained Cory on this exact tower, back before it got rented out to tourists on weekends. Kessler had spent 30 years running Montforest lookouts, the kind of man who treated fear like a maintenance problem instead of a mystery. He had one line he repeated to every new hire, and Cory heard it now in Kessler's exact gravel voice. Radios fail, water runs out, and legs give out on the stairs before anything a person can't explain ever actually gets you. So fix the thing you can fix, and let the rest be somebody else's problem by morning. That voice had gotten Cory through 2 nights already. tonight it was about to lose the argument. The storage door didn't just unlatch this time. It opened, and the first footstep on the tower stairs landed at 2:17 exactly, same as it had for 2 nights running, which stopped being a coincidence somewhere around the second night and had fully stopped being one now. Metal groaned under the weight, and the weight was wrong. Not 2 legs taking turns the way a person walks, something landing too evenly, both feet arriving together, over and over, climbing. The radio crackled when Cory grabbed for it. Not silence. Static, the specific hiss of an open channel with nothing coming through it. A sound the field manual didn't have a code for because nobody who wrote that manual had ever needed one. He went for the trapdoor next, the one that led down into the stairwell, meaning to brace it shut. It had swung free all week. Tonight, the humidity of the ridge itself had swollen the wood tight in its frame, and it wouldn't move, like the whole mountain had picked a side. The footsteps climbed. Cory counted 9 before they stopped. The 9th step, the one that always creaked under his own boots on the way up, and now it held there under someone else's weight, waiting. For a long stretch after that, the ridge did nothing. No footsteps, no wind cycling through the catwalk, just the 2 of them, Cory and whatever was 9 steps down, both holding still at the same time, like the forest itself had decided to wait alongside it. Then the climbing started again, faster. The gap between each footfall shrank from a full second to almost nothing, closing the distance between the 9th step and the door in a way that made counting them feel useless. And this is the part where Cory made the call his supervisor would later flag in the report. The one half the people who hear this story will defend as pure instinct, and the other half will call the worst possible move a person in his position could have made. Instead of bracing the door harder or reaching for the radio a second time, Cory opened his mouth and called down the stairwell, asking who was there. Nothing answered in words. The footsteps just stopped being footsteps and became something closer to a scramble. 4 points of contact instead of 2. Faster than anything. Climbing wooden stairs should reasonably move. Cory's palms were flat against the swollen trap door by then, splinters driving into his skin that he wouldn't feel or notice until the sun came up hours later. The whole cab floor had started to vibrate, faint but steady, every step below traveling straight up through 53 feet of steel frame and into the soles of his boots. The wet iron smell from 2 nights before had come back too, thicker now, mixed with something that reminded him, for one useless second, of a copper penny held too long on the tongue. Whatever was on those stairs wasn't trying to sneak up on him anymore. It knew he was listening, and it didn't seem to care. 2:17 a.m. The footsteps reached the top landing outside the cab door, the same door tourists used every summer to step out onto the catwalk and take pictures of the sunrise. The lantern guttered. Not out, just low, the fuel running thinner than Cory had accounted for, the light shrinking down to a dim orange coin right as the old CCC-era latch on the door. Original hardware, 1935, the same latch 100 paying guests had turned without a second thought, began to move from the outside. Cory grabbed the fire extinguisher off its bracket and jammed the metal mount through the door handle, improvised, never built for this, and it held. For exactly as long as it took for something on the other side to lean its full weight into the wood. The door bowed inward. Once. Then again, the frame creaking under a pressure that didn't ease off between pushes the way a person's weight would. It just kept coming, steady, patient, like it had all the time in the world and Cory had none. For one stretched out second, nothing moved at all. The door held. The bracket held. Cory's own lungs had stopped somewhere in the middle of a breath he hadn't finished taking, and the whole cab seemed to hang there with him. waiting to find out which way this was going to go. A gap opened along the bottom edge of the door. The same swollen wood that had trapped him inside the trapdoor an hour earlier, now working against him a second way, warped just enough at the base to leave a sliver of space between wood and floor. Something slid through it. Cory saw it for less than a second, in the last dying light the lantern had left to give him. Not a hand, not fur. A single fingernail, too long for any hand that size to belong to, ridged the wrong way, horizontal instead of vertical, the way growth lines run on something that isn't supposed to be growing that fast. And it dragged one clean line through the dust on the floorboard before it pulled back out through the gap. One line, that was all. And somehow that one small detail felt more real to Cory than anything bigger would have. A monster is easy to doubt later, lying awake at 3 in the afternoon telling yourself you imagined it. A single fingernail dragging through actual dust on an actual floor is a lot harder to explain away. Everything hit at once after that. The iron smell from 2 nights before, doubled now, thick enough to taste. The cold from the thermometer reading, no longer just a number on a gauge, but something Cory felt directly on his skin, raising the hair on his arms. Breathing that wasn't his, coming from somewhere close on the other side of that door, timed slower than a resting heartbeat, patient in a way breathing shouldn't be. The taste of copper in his own mouth where he'd bitten the inside of his cheek without noticing. The door still shuddering under pressure that hadn't let up once. Cory pressed himself against the far wall, as far from that door as 14 feet of cab would allow, boots braced, every muscle locked, and waited for something to give. At 2:18, exactly like it had 2 nights running, everything stopped. The door went still. The latch went quiet. The cold that had settled into the room lifted like someone had opened a window somewhere, though every window in that cab stayed shut the entire night. Cory let himself breathe, actually breathe, for the first time in what felt like an hour, but had probably been closer to 90 seconds. The extinguisher bracket was still jammed through the handle. The door hadn't opened. Whatever had been on the other side of it was gone, same as always, right on schedule. That relief lasted about as long as it takes to read this next sentence, because relief in a story like this one never gets to last much longer than that. Because when Cory finally looked down at the floor, at the single line dragged clean through the dust by something that shouldn't have fingernails at all, he noticed the direction of it. It didn't point toward the door he'd just spent the last 90 seconds bracing with everything he had. It pointed straight across the cab, toward the table, toward the logbook, still lying open exactly where he'd left it, pages barely moving in the last of the wind coming off the ridge. Open to the page with that one unexplained entry from the family who, according to every reservation record the district office had on file, had never actually stayed in this tower at all. Sunrise came, and at 6 a.m. sharp, Cory's radio check-in went through clean. The Marlinton district office answered on the first crank, static replaced by an actual human voice asking for his status, and Cory told them everything was fine. He didn't know yet what he was going to say instead, once he got back down. He climbed down to check the storage shed for the first time in daylight. The latch was locked. No footprints in the dust at the base of the stairs. Real dust, real ground. Nothing disturbed anywhere a person or an animal should have left a mark. The shed itself sat undisturbed from the outside, same as every morning before. Back in the cab, Cory finally read the rest of the old logbook. Not just the family's entry, the pages before it. A previous seasonal ranger, 3 summers earlier, had logged the exact same 2:17 a.m. pattern for 11 consecutive nights before his rotation ended early. Someone had blacked out his name before the report got filed. His final entry wasn't a description of anything. It was a single tally mark, the 11th one added to a column of 10, and nothing else written underneath it. Cory did the math on his own week without meaning to. 4 nights logged. Add the arrival night that started it all, add today. 12. He noticed something else only now in the full light of morning. The thermometer nailed to the cab wall wasn't Division of Forestry issue like every other piece of equipment in the room. It was older, hand-labeled on the back, in handwriting that didn't match a single ranger currently on staff at Seneca State Forest, or any name in the personnel file the district kept on hand. Outside, the ridge had gone back to ordinary daytime sound. Birds, wind moving through leaves instead of catwalk railing, a distant ATV somewhere on a forest road, somebody's actual normal Tuesday going on like nothing had happened 53 feet in the air the night before. That ordinary sound sat wrong in Cory's chest, in a way the nights hadn't. He knew now exactly what it had been covering up, every single night, right on schedule. The wind through the railing outside ran its same 2-second cycle from his first evening on the tower, and this time Cory caught himself counting the gaps between gusts without meaning to, the way a person counts something they're quietly afraid might stop. He carried his gear down the 69 wooden steps one at a time this trip, testing each board with his boot before he put his full weight down, counting them out loud under his breath. 4 nights earlier, he'd made that same climb in a single trip, gear stacked to his chin, because his knees were 27 and his pride hadn't caught up yet. Coming down, he was a different man on the same stairs. Cory requested the tower never be staffed overnight alone again. The district granted it. Paperwork filed as isolation and fatigue concerns. Nothing more official than that. No one signing off on anything they didn't officially believe. But the rental calendar for Thorny Mountain Fire Tower still shows 2 weeks blacked out that August, no listed reason given, on a booking system where every other week that summer had been reserved a full year in advance. The thing about a real fire tower, one you can go rent for yourself tonight if you wanted to, is that the door still has the original 1935 latch. Nobody's ever replaced it.